In this episode, I'm continuing the build of the Amati 1-100 Chinese Junk. This will be a short episode because there's not a lot of complicated work to be done on the basic hull planking of the model. Also, I'm going to leave the deck planking for next episode because it looks like it might be a little bit more tricky than I thought. The hull planking is done with 1mm by 3mm beechwood. This has a nice peach color, but it's just a bit different from the basswood or birch that I've used on previous models. It flexes nicely, but has a tendency to chip or break if you try to shave it with a knife, such as when tapering a plank near the bow or stern. For the most part, the planks flow naturally from the bow to the stern. On most models, I would intentionally make the planking have joints instead of using entire planks bow to stern, since this is more accurate in terms of historical shipbuilding techniques and gives a nice contrast when you see the joints after they're oiled. But this is a quick, fun build, so I'm taking a shortcut. I finally purchased a set of micro-mark planking clamps for this build and for future builds. In the past, I've used all sorts of wild combinations of clamps, rubber bands, twist ties, clothespins, and whatever to hold the planks in place while curing. These little clamps are pretty expensive. They're $24 for 10 of them. But if you're going to be serious about wooden ship models, they're a great time saver and quality enhancer. The clamps screw into the frames and hold the planks flush to the frame while the glue is curing. Definitely drill a pilot hole first to avoid splitting the plywood frames. You could use a pin vise for this, but a Dremel with a micro bit will save your wrist. As I was planking, I noticed that frame number 6 stands a bit too proud. It forms a large bulge in the belly of the ship, and the planks make a very unsightly angular bump. I took the jutting part of the frame down a bit with a Dremel, and I eased the lines of the ship. I'm not sure if this is an error in the design, but this mod makes for a nice looking hull even if it deviates from the kit's intended shape. Besides, this is not a model of a particular ship, it's just representative of a style of ship common to the Southeast Pacific that had thousands of examples and countless variations on the design. Planking on the hull generally proceeded from gunwale to keel, with a bit of extra work near the stern where the planks spread a bit to form the upsweep of the stern castle. I'm not sure that European term stern castle is right, but I'm going to use it anyway. Anyway, there are some tapered gaps, and I put in some tapered planks to fill in these gaps. At the bow, the opposite situation happens. Here the planks need to be tapered to make the bow lie fair. The bluff bow really makes the planking at the bow easy. European ships require a good bit of plank bending, but the Junk hardly needs any. Finally, the planking is done. The outside is sanded first with 150 and then 220 grit. A block is a good idea here as it prevents digging that might happen with your fingers and keeps the hull from having bumps. Do be cautious of how much you sand. The hull is pretty thin to begin with, and overly aggressive sanding can mean a hole in your work or an eggshell thin hull that you might accidentally puncture later in the build. Holding the hull up to the light occasionally will reveal the places to be extra gentle with. This is the first hull I've planked with beechwood, and I found it pretty nice to work with. It's just a bit harder than basswood, but not so hard as to make your work much more difficult. After smoothing the hull, I apply some wood filler. Make sure it is the hardening kind and one that will take oil and/or stain. After drying, this is also sanded with 150, then 220. I'm always satisfied at this point in my builds as I feel the hull starting to feel more rigid and strong in my hands. At this point, I decided to add the rough underdecking plywood cutouts that are included in the kit. These actually fit quite well with only a little sanding to allow them to drop into place. There are cutouts for the mast areas, poop deck, and main deck. I had to nibble a bit out of the main deck plywood insert since I made a big boo-boo. The deck needs to go on before the stern cabin pieces are in place. Whoopsie. I cut off the pieces that were preventing the deck from dropping in, and I glued them in place separately. Since this plywood is going to be covered up with the final decking made of basswood strips, this is no big deal. The Amati kit includes some very nice walnut half-round molding for the whales. There are 4 of these rails along the sides of the hull, just below the level of the gun deck. 3 of these run smoothly from stem to stern, and the topmost rail has an upsweep to the highest point of the stern. These are very easily added and really look good. I can't wait to oil the hull and bring out the contrast between these two woods. The kit actually shows these fender rails painted green. I'm going to leave them natural because I like the look of real wood. I tend to be very sparing with paint on my models. The hull planking is mostly done. All that remains are some rather time-consuming steps, including the rudder, fore platform, and the trim around the stern gallery. This seems like a good time to end this episode to keep the runtime down. Thanks for watching, whether you're a fellow modeler or just running out of YouTubes to watch.